staff, and the chair for affording me the opportunity to speak to this report. I believe I should only need 5 minutes. However, I ask for understanding from the chair if I'm a touch longer. I hope this committee will recall back in March 2021 when the development charges update study came back to council from Watsons and Associates. At that time, I spoke about the urgency for the city to begin an investigation of the new community benefit charges, especially in light of the fact that unlike other municipalities, we did not take advantage of the then Section 37 bonusing. I raised specific concerns around the way development charges were being calculated based on the assessment of cities' future needs at that time. Here's the relevant community benefit legislation wording from Ontario Regulation 509/20 Community Benefit Charges in Parkland. As you can see, the city has an option to charge up to 4% and give, and we wanted to make sure that the firm instructions were given to staff and the consultants that the full 4% charge be collected. As you can see, the information given in the staff report, these charges can be applied to anything that a full development charge was not charged for. There are many uses for these charges beyond the limited examples in the report. I'm happy to hear the city, albeit quite late, given the September 2022 deadline to formalize a CBC bylaw, is bringing this item forward. I wanted to flag a few issues for your attention about this report and considerations for the direction staff and the Watson and Associate consultants are given on this issue. The Development Charges Update Study from March 2021, which could influence how and what we charge DCs on, and thus what we charge CBCs on, I'm told by staff in the Grids 2 stakeholder meeting will need to be reconsidered in light of the no urban boundaries direction of council. This could have profound impacts on when CBCs can be charged and when DCs would be. Given how much the limited time staff and consultants have put on themselves, June 2022 to report to council, what extent will they engage in stakeholder and community considerations? The development industry is mentioned several times in the report as a key development group for consultation. What about other stakeholders? What about the general public and committee? The regulations and differences between DCs and CBCs are posted in the chart on the screen, and I'll forward it to the clerk afterwards. I won't read them, but just remember the charges for any buildings over 5 stories or more with 10 or more residential units, or redevelopment of 5 stories or greater structure, which will then add 10 new residential units. It doesn't just apply to the downtown area or growth development areas. Will staff and consultants consider that the new bylaw be implemented citywide and not restricted to certain development areas? As always, how much of a climate lens, equity, diversity, inclusion lens, and acknowledgement of the affordable housing crisis will go into the staff and consultants' direction on the study of potential applications for CBC? We collect charges collected from increased growth and gentrification of our city should go to offset some of the challenges the new development creates. In the staff report, it's mentioned several services for consideration in CBCs, which do not seem to apply that lens at all. For example, more parking or expansions to landfill. Even airport lands are questionable in a climate crisis lens. No mention of affordable housing or other ambitious social long-term capital investments are centered. Ottawa and Toronto are considering much more progressive uses for their CBC. Can't we do better? Lastly, I want this committee to consider the scenarios in this report, which will form staff and consultant directions at the end of page 3 and the start of page 4, also listed on the screen. And consider if these directions really envision actual community benefits from these charges. If they ask staff and the consultants to be creative and imaginative in using this new capital revenue sources for actual gains to address the challenges of our city, especially around affordable housing. Finally, I would ask you to empower staff to be bold in the use of these charges, which are new and subject to interpretation, and make sure that these charges do benefit the community of Hamilton and not just offset the lost revenue of parking DCs. Thank you very much. I'll take any questions.
Much appreciated. Thank you, Karl. On the speakers list now, we have a couple of questions. Firstly, I have Councillor Wilson, followed by Councillor Johnson. Councillor Wilson, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the delegate for his constant interest in this city. I have 2 questions of clarification, please. I think, Mr. Andrus, you're making the case for this city's identified crises and strategic priorities to guide where we should be pushing for the both the application of the DC rather, but it's where we would apply the monies. I think you mentioned Toronto and Ottawa as progressive examples. If not, forgive me. But if that is the case, I'm wondering if you could expand a little bit on their models or what you meant by that. Thank you, Chair.
Through you to the delegate.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you very much for the question. So like Hamilton, Toronto and Ottawa are currently going through a review of what they can charge with the new community benefit charges, as is required by the legislation. However, both Ottawa and Toronto already had Section 37 on file and have done so for a number of years. So when specifically, I'll link to the Ottawa staff report, which did include affordable housing as a criteria under which they would be considering for community benefit charges, which I noted wasn't even included in the table of requests. So the Ottawa report gave much more detailed and much more comprehensive both stakeholder community engagement sessions and criteria under which they are considering the CBC charges to be applied. So I just wanted to kind of flag that for council, that there are other areas that are doing things a little bit differently and are looking at these development charges as a way to offset changes in society caused by development charges. And I just wanted to make sure that Hamilton was considering that lens.
Thank you. Thank you. Through the chair, a second question, and you did reference it, Karl, in your answer. You started your delegation by calling for fair, I think, and citywide consultation on this. And I think you just referenced that with respect to Ottawa. I'm wondering if you had some ideas what form that consultation should take, or maybe some further examples we could look to between now and I think the end of June. Thank you. Those are my questions.
Great. So obviously there's little regulatory need for fulsome public engagement on CBCs that I could see listed in. So this would be an option for council to direct. And I would suggest perhaps that given the time constraints and that staff did flag that they will be using mostly online tools to report about the progress on this, that the Engage Hamilton site be populated with some options and a survey distributed to help form the feedback. I would also maybe provide some direction to your outside consultants who will be preparing this report, so we're required to report on the potential development charges that could occur and where they could occur. And of course, maybe asking staff to open up that stakeholder engagement to more than just the development groups listed in their stakeholder engagement in the formal report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Delegate. I'll explore some of those themes further in my questions to staff when we get to that point in the agenda. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Next on the speakers list, we have Councillor Johnson.
Yeah, I want to thank Councillor Wilson for asking all the questions I've got down here. Toronto, I got consultation. Thank you so much for getting the answers. Karl, I know you've done a lot of work on this and I really appreciate it. And I know that you probably must have felt rushed getting your 5 minutes in because you have so much information to share. So since Councillor Wilson has asked the first two major questions that I wanted to ask, was there something in your 5 minutes that you had to take out? Would you like to share that now?
Absolutely. I guess I spent a lot of time going through the relevant regulations as best I could, being that I'm not a planner formally, and posting specific areas of legislation. And what I wanted to post is these CBCs are new, and that they are subject to interpretation. And I would suggest that the Section 37 bonusing that was used by other cities in a progressive way should really, and I wanted to kind of delve into a little bit of what some of the examples around community centers in Ottawa and Toronto had used on those specific charges. So the CBCs are collected into an account, 4% of the charge of the land value before the building permit is issued. And those go into a fund, and then council can direct those funds to be used for anything that they don't collect development charges for specifically. And that's why I wanted to kind of ask you as councillors and as members of this committee to kind of ask staff to really take a hard look at how those development charges could be used more creatively than just the very limited set of offsetting lost DCs that were removed in Bill 108, specifically the parking that I led to. But I also noticed there were some massive changes in the development charges guide around the Alfreda growth area that has now been removed because of the firm urban boundary. And I wanted to suggest that there are quite a number of ways in which the DCs themselves are calculated that I think could be more ambitious. Now, of course, the DCs are calculated based on the grids 2 and of course, council directions and long-term capital needs of the city. When the consultants look at recalculating these DCs, some of the items that they have, for example, close to 30% of the DCs we collect are going towards roads. Well, with a firm urban boundary, there should be a need for a lot less road growth, but a lot more new growth in other areas like transit, stormwater. And so I'm not an expert planner on this issue for sure, but I just wanted to flag some of these issues in depth that when you're looking at the DCs, because what you collect a DC for indicates what you can collect that 4% CBC for. So I just wanted to kind of ask this group to be, more imaginative, I should say, because these are new charges. They're going to LPAT anyway. These are going to be fought, not LPAT, I should say, the new tribunal. But they are going to be, of course, opposed in whatever form they come forward in. So I would just ask folks to be creative, and that's pretty much the tiny bit I come out. I dug a bit more deeply into specifics of the actual areas from the growth studies, but that's the summation.
Thank you so much, Karl. And just for the public record, are you representing a development group? Are you representing a group that would benefit? And the reason I'm asking is you're probably the only one here not being paid to be here today. So I just wanted to get a good understanding that this is something that is your passion.
This is something that I'm passionate. I would flag for a small conflict that I do as part of my work for the Hamilton Community Benefits Network. Consider this something that I did. I happen to have a job I'm passionate about. So in my advocacy for community benefits agreements, I did devote some of my working time to research on this. So I was paid by our not-for-profit for this, but we stand to gain nothing monetarily other than the grants that we've already secured.
Thank you, Karl. And I think that's something I really wanted to drill home is that you were doing this because you felt that there were some red flags that needed to be brought to our attention. So I really appreciate all your efforts on this and your research. It's been very valuable for me. Thank you.
Thank you.